Well, hello again. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about something that I find dear to my heart as a father of sons and father of a very beautiful daughter. We're going to talk about what it means to be a man in America today. So, join us in the conversation. This is the Ray Ellis Podcast. Let's get behind the why. All right, before we get started today, remember to go ahead and click that button and subscribe, and there's a little bell. Ding! Hit that bell so that when we drop a new podcast, you'll be notified. And you help us out there by dropping by our Patreon account and putting a little notice there too. Support the channel. We also just recently, as of a week or so ago, had I always get it mixed up, not Instagram account. That information we had. I'm trying to talk millennial. I'm not there yet. But today we're going to talk about what it means to be a man. We hear so much talk about toxic manhood and this and that and this new pushing. You talked at one of our shows a while ago, one of the, fashion lines had these men.
Baby doll dresses?
Yeah, baby doll dresses for men. I'm just like, why manhood seems to be under attack. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about it from two different perspectives, please. One, I want to hear from you, your perspective, what you look for in a man. And then I want to talk about what it takes to be a man, what it has historically meant to be a man. But before we do, let's start with a quote. I want to start with a quote just for discussion purposes, and I'm going to ask you to respond to that.
Okay.
This is from the book by C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors, his book, The Abolition of Man. He writes, "We make men without chest and expect from them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst." Mm-hmm. Respond to that for me. What do you in this context of manhood?
The first thing that came to my mind was this. I never really thought about what I look for in a man until I realized what I don't look for in a man. Because I see it at a lot of places. Okay. And that's what really made me start even thinking about what do I look for in a man, because I started seeing men, and I'm definitely of marrying age, and I'm on the market. But and I start seeing
send your responses to
right, my profile. But just seeing what is being pushed for manhood, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't want that in a man.
So
right?
What are those things that you look at, you say, I don't want?
Even like in that quote, right? It says we're expecting this virtue out of men, or without even encouraging them to rise to that occasion or to be that. And so, for instance, I go to school, and the way they talk, we talked about this before, toxic masculinity, right? These things like that a man should be a protector, or even, being a breadwinner, and that is looked down upon. Right. Like, no, a man can be more than that. And I'm like, of course, but
he shouldn't be less than that.
I know, he shouldn't be less than that.
He shouldn't be less than that.
And what we're doing is it's this trade-off where it's like, no, men, you don't have to do that. You don't have to be a protector. In fact, you don't even have to
do anything,
and you could, and you should be a feminist, and you should support women and everything.
And you go back to this whole thing, like we talked about abortion, where we are dismissing men from the whole picture,
right?
And it's like, so you're encouraging people to have sex without responsibility, and so all these things go back. But look at this one part. You just make me think again. He says, "We make men without chest and expect from them virtue and enterprise." I once asked a class when I was doing a presentation on this topic. I said to them, how many, if I said to you this morning, I said, I was listening to congressmen talk, and a number of our congressmen were telling lies. So by show of hands, how many of you guys would be surprised? And nobody raised their hand. I said, that's a problem.
That is a problem.
That we do not even expect virtue out of our leaders. So if we have raised people to be virtueless, then it's really criminal. Or at least stupid to think that one day going to turn 21 and become virtuous people. It makes no sense. So we talk about this, having this gravitas of manhood. You talked about the things that you look at and you go, that's definitely not attractive.
Right.
I believe that in order to be a man, the training starts with boys.
Yeah.
And so,
what's so interesting about that? I was talking to Ray, my brother, I know
him.
You know him? Yeah. But we were talking on the phone, and he was just saying that, we're not just raising, because they have a, little 3-year-old boy. My favorite little Ray. Yeah. Anyways, Ray, older brother Ray, was saying...
We're not very creative in this family.
I know, there's like 3 Rays, so it gets confusing.
That's who we are.
But he was saying, we're not just raising a little boy, we're raising a man.
Right.
And so they're trying to be intentional now about how they're raising him. Mm-hmm. And so we were visiting over the last couple months, and I just saw how Ray acted with his son. Mm-hmm. And they're wrestling, and he was holding him down. And then little Ray, he's like, no, let me go, you know, getting like upset. And I was like, let him go. You know, he's upset. And Ray's like, no, fight back. Come on, bud. You can do it. He was encouraging, though. But he was like, no, fight back. Uh-huh. And then he made him break through. And then he's like, good job, buddy. And then he encouraged him. And then you could tell little Ray was like, I did it, you know, and he felt so strong. And then I was sitting there watching it, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what a dad does.
Right.
You know, I think a mama heart, or like how a lot of women are, we're kind of like, he said stop, he's hurting, you know, stop it. But it's like, you're making a man.
You remind me, Ray was 3, and we had taken him to the park. This is when we lived in Southern California, and we had walked down to the park ahead of Mom, so Mom was going to come an hour or so later. So we were running this little circuit course. He'd run, he'd do all the thing, and there was this like Batman, fireman pole that he would run and jump off, grab the pole, and slide down. And so we were doing this little obstacle course, and Mom comes up, and he's running and having fun. He's getting to jump, and she goes, stop, you're going to kill my baby. And he's like, ugh. And he's like, now he's scared to death. I said, woman, don't do that to my son. I said, you just put fear in his heart for no reason. She goes, he could fall. I said, he's going to fall on sand. He's not going to get hurt. It took us another 10 minutes to get him to take that jump again because he put fear in his heart. So,
right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that we do. We have to teach that quality of braveness, mm-hmm. of being willing to accept that challenge. Now, don't write me any nasty letters. I'm not saying you don't train women. We'll talk about that on another show. But right now we're talking about boys, okay? Let's raise boys. And so we were talking again about that idea of being able to fight through and be masculine. Go ahead and launch from that. You just reminded me of that cute little story of my own 3-year-old Ray.
Right. One thing I think that does need to be said, especially in light of people who are being like, you're saying a woman can't be brave? No, of course. Like, you raise strong women too. But like you said, it's another thing. And I think the problem of why manhood and raising boys to be men is so important is because, especially right now in our world, it's on attack.
Right.
And I mean, I just hear the things that are happening in the classroom, and mentioned this last time, we're having conversations about how can we make family genderless.
Right.
And I'm like, well, should we?
Yeah.
No. Like, let's start there before we start talking about how we can destroy the family. Right. And so manhood's on attack, and the things that have usually been seen as masculine traits, encouraging boys to be courageous, brave, that, you should stick
chivalrous.
Up and stick up for women, not in the sense of supporting women's rights in that way, but in the sense of,
supporting women
and be a protector and all these things. Those are seen as being, that's kind of toxic because you're saying then a man can't be these other things. And that's just not true.
It's like, this is what strikes me as so odd. Hollywood does a good job of telling the story, but then they contradict it in real life.
Right. You
go back to the old Westerns, right? And I always use this example where the movie starts and the lone cowboy rides over the hill. He looks down and there's this widow, and she's down there, and these guys are trying to bully her around and take her farm or her ranch. And her little boy is like 12 or 8 years old. Leave my mom alone. And so he rides down, jumps off horse, beat these guys up. Now their back goes, you're going to be served when we come back. We're bringing all our bad guys with us. And so he come back with all his bad guys, and he takes a little boy and says, I'm going to teach you how to shoot and teach a woman how to handle a shotgun, all these other kind of things. And the 3 of them hold off 30 guys. And in the end of the movie, he walks up to the woman and he goes, ma'am, see you later. He doesn't rape her, doesn't take her to bed, doesn't make him his sex slave or anything stupid like that. He takes a little boy and says, now you take care of your mom till your pa gets back. And he goes, yes, sir, I'll do my best, sir. And he rides off, And that was the picture of manhood. Right. Is that your job is to protect. Mm-hmm. And then Hollywood comes forward and we see the same thing. Same storyline, right? Look at The Equalizer. What happens? You got Denzel Washington. He's working in Home Depot, whatever it's called. And this little girl who's being sex trafficked, he befriends her and he realizes she's in trouble. Now, he could shake his head and walk away, but he goes in, he goes, look here, I'm not trying to I'll buy her out of your slavery. And the guy goes, no, we're going to kill you instead. So he goes, mistake. And then the whole movie's about him killing all these bad guys, right? Why? To protect this female. And Hollywood gets the story right. They understand that's the job of the man. And we see that and we go, yay, yay. And we see it with Batman. He comes in and protects the weak, right?
But then in real life, we say, no.
Don't do that. But see, they know what's real in the story because that's what speaks to the human heart. And so they'll portray that in a movie. And then the same characters who play those guys in the movie, Denzel, with exception to Denzel, because I like what he had to say about Manhood. But you hear these people, and then they talk down. They talk down and destroy the very images that they're making a living off producing. And so we see that. Now, what it comes down to is, my mother ground this into my head as a child. She said, I will not allow you to grow up to be a sorry man. She says, enough sorry men in the world. You don't need no more. And so I grew up without a father, but I had an exceptional and have an exceptional mother. Right. And so she made a point out of making sure that I understood what it meant to be a man. I mean, at one point, we were 5 kids and mom and my grandmother. And so I was feeling kind of put out one day because I couldn't get something that I wanted. And I had somehow found out how much money my mom was making. And I was like, she got all that money. She making $89 a week to take care of 5 kids and the grandmother.
And you're thinking And
I'm thinking she can give me the money I need to do what I want, And I said, well, just get food stamps, Mom. You can get some food stamps and then you can use the other money to buy me what I want. And she said, what do I need food stamps for? I said, to get food. She said, I got a job. She said, as long as I'm healthy, as long as I can work, I don't need welfare. She said, you don't need welfare. You get up and get a job. And I was like, yes, ma'am.
You're like, my mistake.
But she was teaching me, see. Right. She was teaching me. Another time, I was in 9th grade, and I came home because I was ready to fight this guy. I fought a lot when I was a kid. And I was getting ready to fight this guy because he had said something I didn't like. And Mom found out about it. She asked me, and I said, well, he does da-da-da-da. And she said, baby, let me tell you something. She said, people are going to say about you exactly what they want to say. She said, if you don't do anything they tell you, they're going to say, that Ray, man, he's a hard-hearted brother. He don't care about nobody but himself. She said, if you do everything they say, they're going to say, that Ray is so weak. Man, he'll do whatever you tell him. She said, so don't worry about trying to please people. She said, you do what God told you to do, be the best man you can be, and let people say what they're going to say. What was she doing? She was teaching me about manly character. So she was grinding that in. And so when your brothers were young, I took them through this exercise one at a time. They didn't know it, that I did it to both of them until later on. When they were 16 or so, I asked them a question. I asked your older brother, I said, how will you know when you're a man? And he looked at me, he said, well, I kind of thought you'd tell me that, Dad. I said, really? You thought I'd tell you when you were a man? I said, it doesn't work that way. I said, there's certain qualities and characteristics that you have to acquire to get to be man. I said, now I can help you, I can guide you, but I can't tell you when you're a man. That's something that has to come inside of you. He goes, oh, okay. So 2.5, 3 years later, his brother was coming of age. I asked him the same question. Now, Ray has gone off to college, and now your brother Justin's getting ready to go off to the Air Force Academy. And I asked him the same question. I said, how will you know when you're a man? He gave me this puzzled look, and he said, well, I kind of thought you'd tell me that. So we went through the whole spiel again, and so as they went through this process with guidance and help from me, and then going through life experience and making those choices and decisions, at about age 21 and a half, and I remember they're 3 years apart, about age 20, 21 and a half, they came back to me and said, Dad, I got it figured out. I said, what's that? I know what it means to be a man now. I said, well, tell me. And I said, that's a good answer. I said, the real proof's in the doing, not just the talking, though. And he goes, yes, sir, I know that. I said, okay, you do that and you'll be a man. So that's the whole key, is that in our society.
That was mysterious. You didn't say what they said.
I didn't say what I said because somebody's looking for some steps, right? We're looking for that puzzle piece. We'll talk about that a little bit here in a minute. But we talked about this whole thing is that you got this process here that in any given society, a female is generally accepted as a woman when she's sexually mature. That's typically the way it is accepted. You know, when a female is sexually mature, we'll take it.
She looks like a woman. Yeah. She's a woman. Right?
But a man is not the same. A man is a quality of being.
Right.
It's a state of being. And so he has to be something other than just older. You don't become a man just because you turn 18.
Right.
What you become at 18 is an adult. And what's the legal definition for an adult? Do you know? Drum roll. It is when what? Do you know?
Isn't it 18 or older? I don't know.
18. Adult. A legal definition of adult is what? Come on, Ryan, off camera.
I'm thinking a person who's 18 or older.
Yeah, but what does it mean when you say a person is an adult? What are you saying?
You are mature physically.
It's ambiguous, right? But really, what an adult is basically is you're now legally responsible for yourself. That's what it means. I can charge you. You can sign contracts, and you can be held responsible for your own life. That's what it means to be a legal adult. That's all it means. It does not have anything to do with maturity. Because you can be the most childish person in the world. Turn 18, you're still an adult. Now, you can turn 18 and be mentally impaired, and they'll say, no, you're reasoning like a child. That's a reason. That's an impairment. That's a different story, though. But becoming an adult does not make you a man.
Right.
It just makes you 18 years old. Now, here's another story. Having a child or fathering a child does not make you a man.
No, there's a lot of people with a lot of kids. Who are not.
So it's that next step. There are a list of groups, and we talk about rituals that societies have initiated to prove manhood. And that's one of the things that we don't have in our Western culture. So again, if you are looking for that Mr. Right, what are the qualities? Let me see how many of those qualities that you are looking for and you better have them all since your daddy is talking about this. So what are the qualities that you think a man should have?
Courage.
Courage.
Doesn't have to be like crazy, right? But courage.
Okay.
Trustworthy.
Okay.
Responsible. Respect, like having respect. I think those are the things that are like that we look for. Strength. Right. And the funny thing about it is these are a lot of the things that they talk about. Yeah, those are like the perfect picture of men, but it's so toxic because no man's like that. But I was like, I beg to differ. It depends on how you're defining these things.
Right.
The way they're defining is always in a very toxic way. I was like, that doesn't mean a man can't cry. In fact, some of the strongest men I know have emotions.
Right.
And they're okay with expressing the fact that, you know what, that they have emotions, and that's okay. So,
but all those qualities you just listed are the same qualities my research discovered.
Right.
That a man is expected to be responsible first for himself, and that he's not going to be sleeping around, impregnating different women, floating around. He's going to be responsible for himself. He's going to be able to control his own passions. He's not going to be a drunk. He's not going to be alcoholic. He's not going to be all those things. He's going to be contained. He's not going to be given to violence. That does not mean he's not capable of violence.
Right.
That he's not given to violence. He's going to be trustworthy. That the people in his community know they can trust him. My grandmother told me this when I was 5 years old. I got caught in a lie. And she said, boy, it was baby when I was good. It was boy when I was bad. She said, boy, don't you be a liar. And I said, no, Mom, I ain't lying. She said, son, she knew I was lying, but she was trying to teach me something. And she said, you got no use for a liar or a thief. She said, if you're a liar, then people can't trust your word. You ain't good for nothing. And if you're a thief, they can't trust you around your stuff. So don't be a liar or a thief, because a man is only as good as his word. So she was teaching me that if I was going to be a man, then my word needed to mean something. And at 5 years old, I was thinking, I don't want this spanking. So,
right. You're like, so
if I can lie my way out of it.
You know what I love about your stories, obviously, because you didn't have a dad in the home.
Right.
And so your mom and your grandmother really made sure they went the extra mile to teach you.
But they did it on purpose.
But they did it on purpose. And it makes me think, too, that's a strong woman doing that.
That's one thing I can understand about the ladies in my family. I am surrounded by strong women. So,
right.
Yes, we'll talk about strong women on another show, but this is a beautiful thing.
It reminded me of Burgess Owens. So this was a few months ago, but he was on the Candace Owens show. They're not related, but and he was basically talking about the same thing about the role that men are to play in society. And one thing he said, that a real man will respect women because a strong society has strong women.
Right.
And I think the way a lot of people I talk to who are in the world, and they have that skewed view of, toxic this, toxic that, because they see that the way manhood has been presented is that, traditional manhood is domineering and, stepping on women.
Right.
And I would say that's not traditional manhood. That is a perversion of what real manhood is.
Talking about perversions, you go back to the perversion of the scripture, because that's where this whole thought comes from in Ephesians chapter 5, that a man is head of the woman. That's what the Bible says. And even Christian women wrinkle when you say that.
Right.
You say a man is the head of the woman,
and it's like,
the woman, you submit to your husband. And they're like, ugh. It's because they don't understand the dynamics that are involved. When we're talking about headship and submission, we're talking about roles. We're not talking about quality of being. In the same way that you have a quarterback on the team, you have a running back. You need both of them. They have different functions. Doesn't mean one is better than the other, but you're going to need both to win this game. And so what we have here is that scripture starts off in around chapter 5, verse 20, I think it is. It starts off by saying, submitting yourselves one to another. See, that's where we miss it at.
That's where I think that part of the verse is like forgotten.
Yeah, so you have my wife. I was talking to my brother, your uncle, about this last night, about the women in our life, our wives. And we're like, wow, looking back over our lives, we've both been married over 30 years, and we're looking at the women over our lives and say, the women that God gave us has made us the men that we are today. I remember I told you the story about the young lady that I was doing this when I first got my first book published. And I was doing an interview with this radio show back in Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had you come sit in the room with me while it was a phone interview. And on the interview, she says to me, we're off air now, Ray. And I said, okay, yeah. She goes, we've talked about 3 times now. I go, yeah. She goes, I think I'm starting to fall in love with you. And I remember I just started laughing. I was like, what? I said, you don't even know me. No, you don't understand. You have all the qualities and stuff that I love in a man. I said, sweetheart, I said, you have to understand, anything that you see in me that you appreciate is the work of my wife. I said, she created the man that you love so much. I said, so it's not me that you're in love with. I said, it's the idea of love that you're in love with. I said, so we not going to be a thing. So that's not the issue. But it was the whole idea is that sense of maleness is attractive to a woman because that's what she was created for.
Right.
And so we have that complementary parts that are working together. And so this idea of manliness, when you come in, one of the things, just a little aside, just going back to give it some context of what I mean. Between 2010 and 2015, the number of violent crimes against women increased in this nation by, not percentage, but by number, by almost 1.5 million more than the previous 5 years. That's how many more offenses. And you go back and you look at them, you think that the majority of those offenses against women were done by men. And then I narrowed it down because I wanted to understand this a little bit better. I looked at the research here from my home state here in Idaho. And in that same year, 2016, there was an increase percentage-wise of violent crimes against women, a 57% increase over the year before. And again, the majority of the violators were men offending women.
Right.
And so I go back to this concept that if men were indeed fulfilling the role of true manhood and being the protectors in society and being those respecter of women and themselves, we wouldn't have that. So
I think the problem with the world philosophy, because they're good at pinpointing problems in society. And I would say, yeah, those are problems. They look at the numbers, see men are abusing women. Therefore, we're going to scrap manhood and we're just going to create a lot of women. And I think that's what their answer is. And it's like, no. Let's encourage them to be real men and like teach, as
Let's
opposed
go to the solution.
Yeah. So I think they see the problem and instead of having a reasonable response, it's like we're trying to create women.
So now we go back to creating men. If you go back in throughout society and almost every culture, there was a process for boys to transition into men. There was things that they were recognized to do. So we can go back to Sparta, We can go to the Zulu tribes. We can go to all these different nations, the American
Mandinka
Indian
tribe.
Yeah, we can go to all and they had a process by which a male, a boy was considered a man. And they had to do with things, and it is universal. It was things like you had to be able to provide. Mm-hmm. So in the Mandinka tribe, for instance, you had to be able to have your own herd of goats and run a farm. You had to show that you could provide. You had to be able to have your own household set up. You had to be able to hunt. So if you couldn't do those basic things, you could never be a man. That means you could not marry. That means they said, it was like, this is going to sound crude, okay? Mm-hmm. But it's like when you're, when you got animals and you got a really bad animal, you don't want that procreating. You don't want that. I mean, you look at it in nature, it's very simple. I was watching this program the other day about lions, and the strongest lion gets all the females. He don't share them with the weak guy. He gets all of them.
Like, we don't need more of you.
We don't need any weak ones, right? Yeah. So he gets all the females. And so in society, in human society, we have seen that mirrored, that there was a quality of man that was appreciated or ideal. And so those qualities were cultivated in that culture. So for an agrarian society, that man had to be able to farm. He had to be able to do it. In a hunter-gatherer society, he had to be able to hunt and gather. He had to be able to provide. He had to be a warrior and a protector of those that were entrusted to him. Never once did I see in all of my studies a society that said a man who can get multiple women pregnant, that makes him a man. Mm-mm. As a matter of fact, that was counted against him for lack of self-control. Mm. So the things that our society has pushed forward as manhood, this rampant violence, just going out and want to fight and beat up people, that was never considered manhood.
Right.
This idea of being with multiple women, that was never considered man. That was considered a person who was irresponsible and bad for society. That person was gotten rid of. Mm-hmm. They were run out of society. So what we have done in our elevation of self is that we've gotten rid of all the rules of conventions of culture and society and said, okay, just be whatever you want to be. Right. And now we have boys, as C.S. Lewis said here, who have been raised without these qualities. And somehow society looks at them and goes, well, you shouldn't lie. And you go, why not? If I lie, like my 5-year-old self, I get what I want. Mm-hmm. So why shouldn't I lie? So my great-grandmother, who I call grandma, was drumming into me that the truth was of greater value than my personal gain.
Right.
Did I get it on the first lesson? No.
Mm-mm.
No.
It's just sad, though, because, like, I had a conversation with this guy, and he was totally in support of women who choose to exploit themselves.
Right.
Okay? If a woman becomes a stripper, he's like, good for her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if a woman wants to, with the whole, like, free the nipple thing, he's like, cool. Good for her. You know, if she chooses that, power to her. That's, you know, and I'm like, no, I don't think that's, to me, a man who supports that and thinks that he's doing a favor for women, that's really unattractive.
It's a man who's exploiting women.
Yeah, because I'm like, you don't really respect women. Because if you did, you would want them to respect themselves.
Right.
But there's that whole movement where it's like, no, they're saying a real man will let a woman be what she wants.
Right.
And
that's like saying a real parent will let a child do whatever he wants. It's stupid. And when I say do whatever you want, we're not talking about in the sense of I'm going to control you and make you do what I say. That's not the point. I mean, I want to be in a relationship with you in a way that I encourage you as a woman to be the best woman you can be.
Right.
And so I don't want you to do those things that's going to lead to harm. And even when I was young and I was dating, and if I met a girl who was really forward, a forward girl, as the old King James says, my first thought was, well, if she's that forward with me, who else is she forward with? That was my first thought. I'm like, okay. Do I really want to invest in that? And the answer to me was always no. Now, that doesn't mean I was virtuous. I didn't make any mistakes. I'm not arguing. I'm saying this idea of this very forward female, I was like, no. Because I was thinking that if I do this, and this is what I told my sons, as you get older, you'll find that sex is very easy to get. Sex is not difficult to get because there's enough hurting women out there who's looking for someone to love them, that they'll give you their bodies in hope that you will give them your heart. That's it. So you'll find people to have sex with. But at the end of the day, you'll be just one more guy who took advantage of this child. So you have to remember, there's a God in heaven who's watching you, and he won't appreciate you treating his child that way. I said, so you have to ask yourself, are you want to be one more guy in that loop? And I told him, I said, I won't be with you 100% of the time. I said, I won't. I said, so you're going to have to learn to monitor and watch yourself. And that's what this whole idea of manhood comes back to, is that, are you responsible? Are you a protector? Do you respect yourself, your elders,
right,
those who are weaker than you are in society? Or is it just, I got mine and that's good enough? So this idea of manhood, when we have boys that are transitioning into manhood, we have to do that on purpose. It can't be something that we just let happen.
Right.
You said earlier I didn't give you the steps. Let's see if I can do that to you real quick.
Oh yeah, because you said they said something that you didn't didn't reveal that little secret.
So this is, now you know I'm going to give a family secret away here, because I do the same thing for you I did for my boys. We have a ceremony in our house. At age 10, we have a naming ceremony, and you get your little plaque. It was a printed out form with your name on it. Tells you what your name means, and then I would take my child and I'd say, "You're an Ellis." Tell them what that name means literally, and then I tell them what I expect of them as a member of this family. Now the message was different for the boys than it was for you, but I told them what I expect, and I told them, I said, "No, at age 16, we're going to have an anointing ceremony. So we got 6 years to get ready for this." I said, age 15, you're going to go out and we're going to start praying, and you're going to pick some of your mentors. And you remember you picked, 5 ladies to be your mentor? And your brothers, I think one picked 5, one picked 7. And for 6 months, we had those people speak into your lives and encourage you and build a relationship with you, to teach you what it meant to be a woman, or in the case of your boys, to help speak into a life about manhood. Just those necessary steps. So very purposefully moving you along this channel that, yeah, these things are happening in your life. This is what you can expect coming over the next horizon, and the next step, and the next step. And so then at age 16, we had a big dinner, the anointing dinner, remember? And we have all these families come, and it's a big gathering, informal, but big gathering. So we have 25, 30 people in the house. And we have the dinner, and at the end of the dinner, we had an anointing ceremony. We lay hands on you, and we prayed for you, and everybody blessed the child. So we're moving you purposefully forward into adulthood. And then the last ceremony at age 18, do you remember that one?
Yes.
And we call that the communion service. And that one, we had our child to do the communion at home. It was a very formal service. Remember, it's suit and tie, everything was just fancy as you can be. You were entitled to invite one person, because this was private. Both my boys invited at the time their then girlfriend. You said, nah, I'm just going to do this on my own. And we had a ceremony with the child and did the communion service. And at that point, your mother and I laid hands on you at age 18 and invited you into adulthood, not manhood, not womanhood, but into adulthood. And we spoke into your life. We prayed for you, prophesied over you, and gave you that unction. Okay, now you need to transition into manhood. And we talked about those steps, those processes. And that was when I asked my boys at that time, how do you know you're a man? And they were like, oh, and we outlined those things about responsibility, about character, about what does it take to be a man. And we outlined those things for them. And you had to build these things into being part of your character. And then over time, they stopped being ideas and became their reality. Right. And so that's what we began to process. But it was a very, very purposefully done thing. Now, that wasn't something that I grew up with. That was something that your mother and I said, okay, we want to raise our children on purpose. So when you were very young, we sat down, how can we do this? And we came with this process.
I think it's so important. I don't think you necessarily have to have a process, but to do it intentionally.
And that is the process, is to do it intentionally.
Do it intentionally, because I think so many people, even branching out away just from manhood, but just children and raising kids, it's not going to happen by osmosis.
No.
Like, yeah, it has to be
The Bible says plainly, it says foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. What that simply means is that children don't know what's best for them. As much as I love my grandchildren, if I let them eat whatever they want, they make themselves sick.
A lot of candy.
They would make themselves sick because they don't know what's best for them. And so when we as adults let children steer their own lives in their course, the Bible also says that a child left to himself comes to ruin. And that an ungrateful, unfaithful son is a horror to his mother. And you see all these examples of these things happening, where you have, and as a police officer, I can't tell how many times I've had grown men who are living in their mother's houses, and they are just an embarrassment to their mother. And the mother's constantly making excuses for them as grown men, constantly making excuses for them, and never allowing them to have the consequences of their choices. So they, as a subsequent, they never grow up. And then I remember there's one incident where I was going to investigate a case of domestic violence. And we get to the house, and we're going through all our process, interviewing the lady. And I said, well, whose name's on the lease here? She said, the apartment's in my name. And I said, so you just got off work? She said, well, I got my first job. I got my second job I got to go to. I said, let me understand this. I said, the apartment's in your name. She goes, yes. I said, you're working 2 jobs. She goes, yeah. I said, and he's doing nothing all day but sitting here playing video games on your sofa in your house. And when you come home late, he beats you.
Wow.
She said, well, you don't understand. I said, you're right. I said, what do you need him for? What is he adding to your life? Well, I love him. I said, okay. Love him from a distance. Put his narrow butt out your house. I said, you need a man. You don't need somebody you got to take care of. But she couldn't sit because she's bought into that idea. And like I said, we'll talk about women some other time. But she's bought into that idea that I'm going to love him right. I'm going to love him good. No, he's got to grow up. And these are the type of personalities that we allow to just flood into society. And then we wonder why our society starts to corrode around us. And if we allow our young men to identify themselves, quote unquote, as men because they can fight or because they can have sex, then we're never going to have the quality of men that we need in society. And you'll never be that man. So my encouragement is that you create this process in your life. If you're a mother or father, if you're a man already, and you say, okay, I'm missing these things, then go back and correct this. Let's get this process in place. It don't have to be like ours. Like I said, my wife and I created this one as a family tradition. I passed it on to my sons so they can do it with their children as they grow older now. But it is a process that we do on purpose to say, okay, we want you to become a man, not just to get older, not just to be an adult, but to be a man, somebody who can be a responsible part of society. And when we fail to do that, it's ugly. It is ugly when men fail to ripen. It's ugly.
We talked about this before in the podcast, and I heard someone else say on the radio that we are reaping the whirlwind. Whirlwind, that's hard to say. And I think a lot of it, but I think we see that even now with how abortion has grown, right? And all these men who are also supporting women's right to choose.
Right. Of course they are. And
it's like
they can have sex without consequence.
There's no responsibility. No. They're not protecting the weakest in society, which are children.
It's like Dave Chappelle said, your body, your choice. He said, my money, my choice. So if you go in that route, then the vacuum that you create sucks in death.
Right.
It sucks in death and destruction. So you're going to have to, as a society, and you can't change society until you change yourself. So
you can change your little part of society.
You got to change
your little spot.
So like I said, if you are a parent and you're raising boys, then do it intentionally. If you don't have men in your life that you can say, hey, be like this man, do these qualities and have that man come speak into your child's life, then do it yourself. Find out the qualities of manhood and then teach that to that young man. If you are married to someone who's not a man, I'm sorry. Next, you need to encourage him and then hold him accountable that you need to be the leader in this household. One of the problems we have is that women will often take that control because the man has not stepped up. And so then it makes it harder for the man to do it. Right. So we have to then, as men, say, okay, I'm going to take that risk of rejection. I'm going to take that risk. I was telling you one time, that guys, if a guy really finds you attractive, he's going to be hesitant to say anything because the more attractive he finds you, the more of a loss at rejection. So it's sometimes it falls back on the woman to say, hey, I'm over here, dummy, to let him know that you do have a slight chance. I'm not saying you won, but you have a chance to come in and convince me. So we have to encourage our men to step up. That risk-taking is part of manhood. The fact that if there's a noise outside the house at night, I'm not going to send my wife out there. That's not her job. Okay. They get to my wife after I'm dead. That's the way I look at it. Because she's not going to get to her while I'm still breathing. So we have to be willing to step up. And that was one of the things that when I worked as a police officer, I was talking to one of our lieutenants, and we were talking about the quality of police work. And one thing he said, the one thing that would get you fired faster than anything else is cowardice. And I go, yeah, because there's many times as a police officer, you get to a scene and you got to do work.
Right.
And there ain't nobody there but you and the bad guy. And you got to do work. You can't sit back and go, I'm going to wait there. Sometimes you can, but sometimes you can't. Right. Sometimes you got to step right into it.
I just think it's funny because while we're talking about this, and before you had said, Hollywood, they do the movies right.
They do.
And I was just thinking, like, you're so right. Because in movies, if there's a situation where there is danger, and in the movie, if the man tries to get the girl to go, it's like, it's supposed to be funny, right? It's not good. And it's presented that way.
It's like that movie, The Battle of Five Armies in the Hobbit series.
Right.
They go out there and they do all this fighting, and the men are out there fighting. He goes, come on. And the one guy's like hiding back.
And he dresses
I'm going to take
up
care
like
of their children. And then he goes and eventually dresses up like the woman. And he goes, come on. And the woman stands up. She goes, we stand with our men in life. I say we stand with them in death. Come on. And all these ladies grab hoes and axes and around. And this guy, no, I'm an old lady. He turns out, and all of a sudden it's like, you're a coward.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, you deserve to get eaten by the troll. You're a coward. Nobody accused the women of being cowards.
No.
Because it wasn't their responsibility.
It doesn't mean they couldn't rise up. It just means it wasn't their
responsibility.
Primary role.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the man, that's your job. And when you weren't, it was counted as a negative. So they and those archetypes exist because they're real. They're there. You see them.
There's some truth to it.
See them. In all of society, you see it. And so when we get away from that, we start courting death. As you referenced the prophet. So when you sow to the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And we'll add that to the screen later for our rest. But when you sow to the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And that's what we've seen in our society. We've sown to the wind, and we're starting to reap the whirlwind because of the breakdown and falling apart of the families and society as a whole. Well, I'm sure we've gone over our allotted time for today's segment, but I thought this was an important topic to talk about, manhood, because she's on the market, but you got to be a man. I'm only half kidding. No. But really, guys.
Kidding.
Yeah.
No, you got to be a man.
So we're just trying to get behind the why, guys. Behind the why, what it takes to be a man in society. Behind the why, what it takes to be a man that a real woman wants. No woman wants well, that's a different topic. But thank you for joining us here behind the why. And guys, boys, let's be men. Women, demand that you're men. Be a man. Until next time, love, peace.
Peace.